But I think there's something to if you're doing something and you're not getting the positive reinforcement of like good grades or feeling like you're the best and you still want to do it, that means something.
I'm Charla Lauriston. I've been a TV writer for almost a decade, but it wasn't that long ago that quitting my day job and moving to Hollywood was nothing but a pipe dream. After lots of failures, many mistakes, and many lessons learned, I've now written for 7 TV shows, 2 features, and sold 3 TV pilots. I've done all this through imposter syndrome, burnout, and with zero roadmap. On the Working Writer podcast, I pull back the curtain on breaking in and teach screenwriters and creatives how to thrive both personally and professionally. Without further ado, let's get to work. What's up, party people? Welcome to another episode of the Working Writer podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. I have Brandon Gardner on the show today. So Brandon is the co-creator, showrunner, and director of the new Peacock show In the Know, featuring Zach Woods, and also co-created by Mike Judge. So there's some pretty heavy hitter, big names in this show. And the interesting thing about Brandon is that this opportunity was his first writer's room. Now, Brandon's been a part of the UCB comedy scene for over a decade. I met him over a decade ago when I was in his class. And fun fact, I thought that he hadn't taught me. So we did have this conversation thinking that he hadn't been my teacher, but turns out he was my teacher. And I know that because I found an email from him from 2011 telling me about giving me notes for how I did on my 401 class. So super fun episode with Brandon, and just interesting to hear about his path, to hear about the length of time it's taken for him to break in and the things that contributed to that. I found this episode with Brandon very interesting because of that, because Brandon went into the career kind of unsure of what he was going to do and kind of not really aiming towards anything, which was so different from how I went into it. I went into it the very immigrant way, which was I better find a job or forget it. So I think there's no right way. It's always up to us, however we proceed. But I love this episode with Brandon. I hope you enjoy it too. Here's my interview with Brandon Gardner. Brandon Gardner, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm sorry I pronounced your name like you're a masshole from Boston, Massachusetts, but I can't help it.
Well, you said it affectionately.
Yeah, I did. 100%. And it's truly affectionate. I do have a lot of affection for you. You never taught me at UCB, but I was very aware of you as a teacher in New York in UCB. So I don't know. I think I have a very teacher association with you.
You know what's so funny? I couldn't remember if I had taught you or not.
You didn't, yeah, but I was in the mix while you were teaching.
In that world, and
yes,
you were on indie teams with people I had taught.
I was, and then I ended up hosting a school night for a while. Yeah. Yes, but I never got on a team at UCB, but I did get on a team at the Pit. So it feels like a million years ago. That's what it feels like. Yeah,
it feels like a different lifetime.
It feels like a different lifetime. I feel like this is such a great opportunity to get to know you because I know of you and I don't know you. Mm-hmm. And I'm so excited to see that you got a show on television that you show ran In the Know, which is incredibly cool. So I'm excited to chat with you.
I'm very excited to chat with you.
So where are you from, Brandon? Who are you?
Yeah. I'm from upstate New York in a very small town, as upstate as you get. So New York, for people who aren't from the state, it's a pretty big state. And I'm from a town called Saranac Lake. That's a 6-hour drive north of New York City. The closest big city would be Montreal, which was
holy crap,
half away. Yeah.
Holy crap. You're still an hour and a half from Montreal.
Yeah. In a town of 5,000 people.
Wow, you're from a tiny, small town.
Yeah, I think so small that it's technically, I think, a village.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so when did you travel to New York, in high school? Was that a trip that you made?
No, it was too far away. So in high school, if we went on a class trip somewhere, it would either, a lot of times it would be Montreal. Like we went to a museum, which didn't maybe only happen once. It was Montreal, not New York.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, I don't think I went
So,
to the city till I was in college.
wow. Even I went to New York City when I was in college. I went to school, a small Catholic school in Boston called Emmanuel College, and we went to New York. And that was the first time I ever went to New York, was with my college. And we went to see some Broadway shows. Avenue Q, we went to go see.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. So,
That's yeah. I can picture the year now. Yeah,
yeah. So I was closer to New York than you were.
yeah. I was very very far away.
Wow. Okay. So, when did you start doing? What was the performance like? Were you performing in Cyrenaic?
No, and it's funny. I was like reflecting on this earlier. I do. Do you do morning pages?
I don't, but I know that so many people do them, and I know
I
what they
think
are.
it's the one thing from that book, The Artist's Way, that I like stuck with, and that I think I got something out of. So I was doing that earlier today, and sort of reflecting on my youth. And what I was thinking about was how I was like a very very shy child, but I was very performative, basically just at home with my immediate family.
That tracks.
Yeah, and so that's how I was until like and I played sports, which was sort of like an outlet where you didn't have to be like sort of socially outgoing to do. And then I hurt my knee playing soccer my senior year, and I did some plays, which was sort of like tiptoeing into performing. And then when I went to college, I saw like a flyer for an improv group, and that's sort of how I got into performing comedy.
Where'd you go to college?
I went to Binghamton, which is a New York State school that also people probably haven't heard of unless you're from New York State.
And what did you study at Binghamton?
I thought I was going to be a lawyer, so it started as this like pre-law major, and then I one of my favorite uncles was a lawyer, and at some point I remember we were in the car together, and he was like, "Don't be a lawyer." And I think that was a big factor, and it was sort of a combination of that and starting to really enjoy performing, doing improv, where
Yeah.
I switched my major to theater because it sort of felt like the closest thing to majoring in improv.
Wait, so you switched your major to theater in college after your uncle told you not to be a lawyer,
Yeah.
but you already had an interest in improv.
Hmm.
Okay, all right.
I
I
was
think I
very bad at theater.
okay. I think I missed how you got into improv. I think I missed that. If you didn't,
Basically, like I was going to the dining hall, and there was a flyer that said like,
right.
"Do you want to try to be funny or something?" And I was like, "Oh,
And
yeah."
this was in college.
This was in college. It was
So
like
you're
a year
doing
before.
okay. So you were doing like indie improv in college, like on the side, but you were majoring. You switched your major to theater. That's interesting.
Into theater, and then that was interesting because I was always a good student, and theater was hard. Where like theater was the first time I was like not getting good grades, and in like
That's
things where I
funny.
was like, huh, it's like in my movement class or
Yeah.
my scene study class, I was like, huh, I've never gotten a B minus. Ugh.
Yeah. You know what? That is so interesting. I totally relate to that. I remember my very first improv class. I don't remember my improv teacher's name, but wonderful humans who taught me improv. Cuz I also wanted to be a lawyer, which I also kind of want to dig into a little bit because I feel like so many comedians start out as people who wanted to be lawyers.
Mhm.
Like, what is it about going into that profession and then switching to stand up or improv or comedy specifically? What's that about? But I was also a good student, and I remember in my improv class I was the worst student. I was just not,
There you
and I'm
go.
such a perfectionist, and I so wanted to be good and get the pat on the head from the teacher that you're doing a good job, and I just wasn't fucking. I was too in my head. I
Mhm.
was too much trying to do it right, quote unquote. And
Yeah.
it took me quite some time to get out of that, but I 100% relate. It drove me nuts. I wanted so badly to be a good student at improv.
But I think there's something to if you're doing something and you're not getting the positive reinforcement of like good grades or feeling like you're the best and you still want to do it, that means something.
I think so too. I think so too. Especially in a world that is so ambiguous and there's so little direct feedback from the world and direct validation from the world that you're doing a good job. That,
Yeah.
like, it is true love, I think.
In a way, I think it was probably good for you that you had that experience, as opposed to people who maybe are getting a ton of validation, like by their improv teachers or something that again doesn't matter.
I do actually. There was somebody in our class again whose name I don't remember anymore. He was till this day the funniest person I've ever seen in improv, from level 0 at the pit to like, and he did UCB stuff too. He was the funniest person. He's never done comedy again. I think he was like in sales or something, and then he just like never, just never did it.
I've been in
Funniest person.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was good for me though to one like deal and face with that to deal with that issue that I was having, that fear of looking stupid. I had this real fear of just like being silly and letting go and looking stupid. And it was, of course, like transformational. That's another thing, is that like improv sometimes can be a little bit like, this is going to sound lame, but spiritual to a certain extent, I think, because yeah. Because it just kind of like, yeah, it just kind of makes you like face your fears, face your ego, get out of your shell, like live out loud, like live in the present moment. Like it's just really fantastic for that.
Were you someone who before improv though felt like a funny person, either with your friends or
with my friends, close friends and family, yes. But I was also super shy. Like super shy. We also moved around a lot, so I never felt like settled anywhere, like except for at home, where this is my consistency, is with my family. So I was really silly with my family, sarcastic, but in school, absolutely not. Like super quiet, mousy, kind of no eye contact, kind of just scared all the time, just shy all the time. But yes, improv and stand up were the things that kind of like really made me come alive. It was really great. Cool. Yeah, it was really cool. So what is this lawyer thing? What's that about?
I was thinking about it when you brought it up. I think for me, part of it is just how few jobs I even knew existed. I just didn't know that many things you could do.
You could either be a lawyer or a doctor, essentially. When we were growing up, yeah.
Children's books where they show you people's jobs, and it's like, oh, this person's a baker, and this person's a tailor, and this person's a construction worker, and this person's a lawyer. And it's sort of like, well, I do okay in school, and I like to read. Maybe lawyer. It was not much beyond that.
100%. All right. Did your uncle ever tell you like what it was about being a lawyer that was not great?
Well, I do know that. I don't know how much longer after, maybe 5 to 10 years later, he quit being a lawyer and became a hypnotherapist, which is like the thing he loves doing.
I love it. Wonderful. Yeah. Wonderful. All right. So now I'm really curious to know. So you went from Binghamton, you dropped the pre-law, you started doing theater, you weren't doing well. And then do you find your way to New York City UCB after that? What's the trajectory?
Yeah, so I was like doing short form and becoming really curious about improv. And we went to this college comedy festival that I think maybe still exists, but that it was at Skidmore College. And we were by far like the worst group there. And but it was in a lot of them were doing long form and sketch, and a lot of them were like very sophisticated. Like it was like I was there at the same time as like Donald Glover and all these NYU people who would come out and do like a very good sketch show, and then we would come out and do very bad short form. But I knew, I was like, ooh, I want to get good the way everybody else is. And one time we went to that festival. UCB's touring company was there teaching workshops.
Oh, so very cool.
Took a workshop, and I didn't know about UCB before that. I'd sort of only heard of like Second City. And so I was like, oh, maybe I'll try to do that. And so shortly after that, I signed up for an intensive at UCB. And they used to do this thing, like this is 2005, UCB, where I signed up all at once for 101, 201, and 301. So the first three levels, and you could get like a value bundle. And I can't remember what I paid for it, but much less than people pay for classes now. And I took them in 3 weeks.
Holy shit!
While like sleeping on people's couches in New York.
And what was that experience like?
It was good. I mean, I was so excited to be there, and I'd always wanted to do that. And a lot of it was sort of maybe different from your experience, where it was sort of affirming, where I was like, I think I'm good at this. I got like, there was like a day in 201 where someone was asking the teacher about game, like that, this UCB idea of game, like what's funny about your scene, which at the time was like not, I think, taught in a very clear way by UCB. And the teacher was like, well, Brandon does it. It's what Brandon's doing. I didn't know that I was doing that.
Yeah.
But maybe from like watching enough comedy and through osmosis, I guess I was doing my best to be funny. That I was like, oh, maybe I get this. Maybe this is something I could be good at. And I think it's like, for me, improv, like from being really shy at school and being like funny and outgoing at home, there's like something about improv, like the safety and structure of improv, that allowed me to be more outgoing in a way that I couldn't have been like at a party or like at the lunch table.
Oh, wow. For sure. 100%. I think it feels like you went to school to be funny. I mean, you did. So, yeah. So you feel so much more confident. And you were doing it in school before you did it at UCB. So you had a bit of a pre-education.
Yes. Like not probably good technically wise, but there was something about like I had performed in front of people.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then what did you do from there? So you took those 3 classes in a row.
I took those 3 classes in a row and didn't have a place to stay or money. So I went back home to upstate New York and like continued to do like, I worked at a hotel, like waiting tables at the restaurant. And so that's what I always used to do for like summer and winter breaks, and basically did that and saved up as much money as I could. And then moved to New York once I had saved up more money in January of the next year.
Okay, awesome. What was the trajectory like from New York to LA? Because you live in LA now, and you have for like a while.
So since 2016. Yeah, so it's been years, which is crazy.
Yeah.
It was okay. It was so like going back to New York. I just loved UCB and improv. I was obsessed with it and really truly believed. And I told this to my parents, which must have been terrifying to them, because I was waiting tables in New York too. I was like, I think if I can get on a Herald team, I can wait tables and be on a Herald team the rest of my life.
Aww.
Money. And so like, and that was true for a long time. And I just like loved that and didn't really see, it's interesting. Like you meet at UCB, like from listening to your podcast before, like you've talked about how like you had no map for how to go about this. And I definitely also I didn't even think about steps, like next steps. And there's some people you meet at UCB that are so sophisticated about that, who like somehow have agents, and it's like, how did that happen? And like are taking meetings, and it's like, what? And are very much like, well, improv is a step I'm doing because I have this end goal. And I had never had a step other than UCB, but I was there long enough where it started to feel weird that I didn't. Where it's like, yeah, why? What am I trying to do? And so then I started trying to get into writing just because it felt like I should be trying to do something else.
Damn. What's that like? It's true. It's like I am one of those people that had an end goal because I didn't come from like comedy when I was young. Mm-hmm. Like I came from like the world of get a job. So I was like, I can't do this forever, you know? I have to do something. And it just seemed like such a great training ground to do other things, which I very much believe it is. Mm-hmm. And I also, if I'm being honest, was never fully at home on stage as an improviser. Like I always felt like I was learning something and trying something, and I had some good natural instincts, mm-hmm. but I if I'm being honest, I never quite felt like at home.
What were you doing in
Yes, the way that I didn't stand up, or the way that I do, like when I'm writing, like, my own thoughts and my own work, like that is when I feel the most like, okay, I'm doing something that is very true to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just didn't feel like I was ever at ease. But it just makes me wonder, yeah, what was that like for you? Like that feeling that maybe I should be doing something, because I don't know if you have to unless you,
Yeah,
yeah,
no, I mean, I get like for me, it's just I think like the I'm not sure if you have to, but at a certain point, you have to be like, well, how long do I want to be really poor? Because I sort of was doing everything I could do at UCB, and I loved it, and I became a teacher, and I was teaching a ton, but existing on so little money. And when I was single and didn't have kids, that was sort of fine. Where I was like, I don't have expensive tastes in things, and I like what I'm doing. Um, but as you start to get older, and you're like, I probably should be making more money than this. I should probably have some sort of savings. And then definitely like ratcheted up so fast. As soon as I had a kid, I was like, oh God, I can't be this poor.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, what did you start doing when you realized I can't be
Yeah.
this poor?
So even when I was in New York and before I was married, before I had kids, I was like, well, I want to start writing. And so when UCB first had like mod, like sketch teams, I became like a writer performer and did that for a while and sort of got and like did okay, but was like, I don't know if like writing sketches like the thing that makes me most excited. And so I started taking a friend of a friend or a friend's husband had taken a playwriting class and it wasn't that expensive. And I was like, I'll try that. And I really liked that playwriting class. And that was, it's funny, like you were saying, like you never felt that like fully you maybe or comfortable doing improv. For me, it was like writing sketch where I hadn't really figured out a way to write a sketch that felt like as satisfying as improv could feel to me sometimes. But I started to find that writing really short plays where I was like, ooh, this is really fun. It almost felt like improvising where I'm playing all the characters. And I was doing that. And and then I got married in New York. And when I moved to LA, Zach Woods, who I was friends with sort of loosely from being around UCB, he had read like plays I'd written for that class like years ago and liked them a lot. He was like the only person who ever one wanted to read them and two ever was like enthusiastic about them. And he was like, I want to start trying to write, but I've never done it. Would you want to try to do that with me? And then we started writing together when I moved. And it was like a long, slow process where we wrote a feature that we liked, that the idea was that he would act in. And it was like really, it would be this indie that we had different production companies attached to, but never could get made. And so it was like a weird thing where, because my wife very like in a very normal way would sort of be like wanting to plan into the future, and I'd be like, well, I don't know. It's like
whoa.
They work, but I don't know if I'll ever make money.
Right.
But I'm not quite ready to give up. Give me another year or two, and so it went like that where he and I wrote a couple of short films that he directed, and they were received well, but you don't make any money doing short films. But through like a series of events, it led to the thing that finally gave me a little bit of money, which is our show getting made.
Wonderful. All right, well let's take a quick break, and then I want to jump into the show.
Great.
Are you ready to join hundreds of writers and creatives learning how to take their lives and careers to the next level with the Working Writer newsletter? Then go to theworkingwriter.com/join and sign up to get the Working Writer newsletter straight to your inbox. And now, on to the show. Super exciting when I saw that you had a show, Brandon, because I know that you've been doing so much for so long, and I was just like, yes, victory. Finally.
Yeah, there's people like everybody you're happy for, but there are some people when I see things, I'm like especially happy for them.
Yes, because you know the sweat and the tears behind the scenes and like, you know, the years of waiting for like the thing. So that's really awesome. I was really excited for you. And it's not a little win either. You've got Mike Judge, you've got Zach Woods, who is now who he is,
Yeah,
which is wonderful. You just have a really stellar cast and a very smart idea. I'm like super curious to know how the idea started, and then I want to get into like the nitty gritty, like how did Mike Judge get involved, all of it.
yeah. So the Mike Judge part is like the first part. So he had a meeting in early 2020, like early pandemic. He had a meeting where someone brought up the idea of a half animated interview show, sort of like Space Ghost, which I had never seen, but is always referenced with our show. And he was thinking about that, and then he asked Zach if Zach would be interested in trying to develop that with him. And then Zach was like, "Well, could Brandon come in and develop it with us?" And Mike had read that first feature script that Zach and I had written, like when I first moved to LA. And there's some overlap, I think, comedically or like tone wise. And so he was cool with that. And so the three of us sort of came up with who the main characters were and what sort of the central premise of the show was and the structure of the show in fall of 2020. And then we pitched it in like May of 2021.
Super cool. What was that pitch process like? I mean, I feel like when you go into a pitch room with Mike Judge, like
Yeah, I had a
it
lot. Yeah,
seems chill. Yeah.
it's interesting. Yeah. So one, Mike is so smart. And for being like the most famous, successful person involved, though, he's also very modest and very, um, almost like quiet and sort of doesn't want to take up too much space. So that's sort of an interesting energy of like the most famous person who's not the loudest person, which is not always the case. And so when we did the pitch, it was mostly Zach and I talking, and it was all over Zoom. And for the most part, Zach and I had sort of like a script of the pitch we went through, where we sort of talk about the show and why we want to do it and who the characters are and like what episodes might be. And I think because Zach and I have both performed together even a lot, it sort of became like a little two-person show that we would do in every pitch, including sometimes like acting out parts of what the show might be, of like playing characters and stuff. It was like I would be so much more terrified to have done the process like by myself.
Yeah.
Like Zach is so confident, which is one of the reasons why it's really fun to write with him. And then Mike would sort of come in with his little bit sort of at a certain section and talk about that. And a lot of that was like why we were doing stop motion, which was something he was really excited about. And yeah, and that was the process.
Damn, you're making this sound very easy breezy, Brandon. I'm just like, there's no fucking way this whole thing.
Well, it's funny because truly, when we got the show, like if there had been an opportunity for me to have been like, if it wasn't the show that I was co-creating, like if I could have been the writer's assistant, I would have been thrilled because
Wow.
I didn't have anything, right? I had no writing.
Right. Okay. Well, so then I'm wondering, how did you go from having no writing credits to being the showrunner? And like, were you the sole showrunner, or was Mike in the room sometimes? Like, what was the deal?
Yeah,
Okay.
so Zach and I wrote the pilot, and we were the showrunners, and we ended up directing all the episodes too, which we didn't know
Very cool.
going into it. But it was sort of a thing of like there weren't directors in the budget, so it was sort of like, do you guys want to direct? You don't want there to not be a director, so yes.
Right.
And then yeah, so Mike at that point of the process, it would be we'd send him scripts and get any feedback he had. And with animation, there's like the animat. Have you written for animation?
I have, but I don't feel like it's that different. It didn't feel that different from a live action show.
For me, I have nothing to compare it to.
Right.
This is my only experience. But the one, and I guess also stop motion is a little different from 2D animation. But for this, they have like an animatic step, which is like real rough 2D animation before they actually go to the puppets. And so we would send those to Mike for feedback as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, very cool.
Yeah.
Again, this sounds very easy breezy. Not my experience of any show. No show. I mean,
Yeah. I knew
not that
nothing
it's
about.
bad, but like,
No, I get it. It's funny. It's like I knew nothing about how any of this works before, and now I sort of still don't know. I just know how it worked in this very particular, very like fortunate way. Where it's like
yeah,
if I tried to go through it again, it's like I don't know
right,
how
right,
Mike and Zach aren't attached to it. Probably
right,
totally different. I probably just
right.
never have a meeting.
So, how many people were in the writers' room?
It was me and Zach and seven writers.
Oh wow, you guys had quite a big writers' room.
That was interesting. It was like the whole. Well, I mean, yeah, all of this again. I'll just keep repeating. It was so new to me, but it was like we didn't have a huge budget, and so it was sort of figuring out who we could afford would sort of depend on would sort of tell us how many writers. So we could basically get like a few expensive writers and have a really small room, or we could have seven less expensive writers
Yes.
who like we were all excited about, who like we were
Yeah.
like their sample we like as much as this very expensive person.
Mm-hmm.
We would really like meeting them. So we sort of went that direction of like everybody in the room had more. For the most, I don't. Maybe there's one or two people that was their first room, but for the most part, everybody had more writing room experience than Zach and I.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
very cool. What was it like running a room of people who were more experienced than you?
Again, partly it was really helpful that I was doing it with Zach, who is just confident about a lot of things, and so he seemed not nervous about going into it, and so I was like, I sort of fed off that confidence. But then I also like I called Phil Jackson before, and I was like, "Give me any tips you can give me." And I called Anthony King, who had been a showrunner, and been like, "What advice do you have?" And so I did take their advice for sure into account as we started it. And then because we'd never run it, the other thing that maybe is different from other writers' rooms is like there was no hierarchy. Like I didn't like. It was interesting when I finally saw the credits of the show because I could see the writers like different titles.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know what those were when we were writing. I didn't say
Yeah.
you're a script coordinator. So I had no idea. Like it was never like something where you had more responsibility or
Right.
control over anything than this person. And it was also because we didn't really know how any of this worked. We had 6 episodes, and how we sort of ended up like actually writing the scripts is like the pilot had been written, and so for the 5 remaining ones, we'd like have 2 writers write each episode together. So everyone wrote half of an episode basically,
Oh, very cool.
and then the writer's assistant wrote one with me.
Very cool. So you guys gave the writer's assistant a writing credit. Really
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
She was very funny, and
Uh,
yeah, participatory in the room. Yeah.
I love it. What did Phil and Anthony King tell you?
It was a lot of things. Like a big part that we took away was, or that I was like talking to Zach about, was like both of them were sort of explaining like the sort of blue sky period of the writer's room, of like just giving people a chance to like talk and talk about themselves and like get to know each other, and then just like and not being stressed out about getting to outlining a particular episode too soon. So like the whole writers room was together for I think 8 weeks, and we probably spent at least a week and a half in that blue sky period. And it was a lot of just being like, in what ways do we relate to the characters, or in what ways do these characters like remind us of people from our lives? And it's just talking about that. Or a lot of it was like talking about what we imagine these characters' lives have been like up until now. And so there's a lot of stuff that even does not ever make it into the script, but I think was like helpful for us to think of all the characters as people.
Very cool. Now that you've had a show,
Mm-hmm.
you've been in a writer's room, and it's your first writer's room, but you were the showrunner, which is a very unique and
Very weird.
interesting
Yeah.
experience. Yeah. Uh, what has the response to the show been like, and what has it been like? Hearing the response to the show as the person who is a co-creator.
Yeah, it's interesting. What's the response? Like critically, I guess it's been pretty good. That was like one thing I wasn't sure if I would read reviews because I was like, I don't want it to, like depress me or put me in my head. But at a certain point, I sort of one thing that was nice about the process overall is like one, I wasn't the like sole creator or showrunner. It was like Zach and I. And then I also like got the experience of the writers' room of like so many people are involved in writing them. And then also with the animation, there's all these people at Shadow Machine, which is the company that did the stop motion, that we're involved with for so long, and we're involved with the editors who are contributing so much to it that it really, in like a way that I think was healthy for me, like it didn't feel like my show, where if like it failed, I was failing, or if it succeeded, it was my success. It felt like it did feel like ours. And then the reviews were pretty good, so that was nice. But it's also something where we did the show at Peacock, and I think a good thing about that was the creative executives there were like very supportive of all of our choices, had good notes, and were very flexible with their notes, and sort of let us make the show we wanted to make, even when that was a little weird. But Peacock does not have a lot of subscribers, and so it has like a very small sort of cultural footprint where I don't think that many people have seen the show because a lot of people just don't subscribe to Peacock.
Yeah, I mean that's the case for so many shows. I
Yeah.
feel nowadays, like half the time when somebody asks me what shows I've written on, I don't even want to say because I'm like, you don't even know them. Like you've never heard of them probably, and they were on bigger networks, and still because there's so much out there, it's like they don't. Half the time, people don't know.
It's good. People will mention a show and I haven't heard of it, and they'll say like who the creator was, and it's like, oh, I love that person.
Yeah,
They'll say who the cast is,
it's
like,
a
I love
huge
all.
person. Yeah,
Yeah. If I had known about the show, I definitely would have watched it.
yeah,
It came out 5 years ago and has already been canceled.
yeah,
And yeah.
yeah. It's a very different landscape than when we started or when we started trying to like break in. So like I almost don't even feel bad. Like and I'm not even trying to be like dismissive when someone asks me. I'm just like,
Although it is like,
yeah,
it's still something where you could mention it, and they could be in that sliver of people that are
sure,
like,
yeah.
good on that. Yeah.
I'm in Vancouver, Canada now. My husband's job moved us here, and most Canadians don't know like The Last OG. They've never heard of that show. They don't know they don't know any of the shows that I've written on. They've not seen Grand Crew. You know what I mean? So it's like, and I feel like the people who have are like in LA. Like they're the people who are in the industry who like know Tracy Morgan.
Those are two examples of like big shows.
They are to me. To me, they're quite big shows. But I'll generally just say I've worked for TBS and NBC and like Netflix or something like that, because I'm just like, you don't know the shows that they don't know Hoops, which was that had Jake Johnson. Like that to me, Jake Johnson's a giant star. He is a giant star. Never heard of it, and it's on Netflix.
Yeah,
never heard of it. So I'm just like, you don't know, but I don't know.
Yeah, I guess that you're right. That it's like there's very few shows, like unless you go for like Succession or I don't
exactly.
know
exactly.
Like, oh, I've seen that. I know what that is.
Yeah, and even shows like White Lotus, which are it's a huge show, but even people who haven't seen it have heard of it because it was so well like marketed and like promoted. So I'm just like, I don't know, our shows, the shows that I've worked on have not gotten huge promotion, which is okay, but still like I still think that like people not knowing your show is just a different thing than it was a few years ago.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like, what I'm going through now is also the interesting thing of like what apparently used to be the case with broadcast shows is you'd know whether or not your show got renewed within like a few episodes.
Yes.
And now it's like my show's fully released. All 6 episodes are released, and they're still like, we're gonna wait and see. We're still hoping it picks up. Like they will sort of admit, like they won't tell me numbers, but it's like they will describe it as like a niche show.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, that means not a lot of people are watching.
Right.
But they're also like, we basically don't want to make a decision on a season 2 for a while. Okay.
And sometimes it will take a while. Like like I also feel like there's not as much pressure to like follow things up quickly as there was in
Yeah,
the
exactly.
past.
There's no season.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like you might not see another in the know for a year and they don't, that's fine with them,
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're also in
Um,
a weird, like, situation that I don't think most shows are like, where because it's stop motion, there are all these puppets and sets that right now are in storage
that is so funny.
that I think at some point they'll stop paying for the storage, and so those will just all get thrown out. And so if it does get,
No.
it's have to be all rebuilt.
No. Can you take
Yeah.
some of the stuff
I'm
if you
gonna
wanted
try to
to?
contact the production office and be like, "How could I get some of the puppets?"
Yeah, I would think that that would be pretty cool to
Yeah,
have,
we'll throw 'em.
no matter what happens. Yeah. So I guess I really want to know, you've had a really long journey. If in the know is, I mean, would you consider in the know like the pinnacle of your journey so
So
far,
far,
or
sure, yeah.
so? Yeah. So if this is the pinnacle of your journey so far, like what reflections do you have on your journey at this point?
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, what are my reflections? I mean, one thing that I should say is like it's both my pinnacle so far, and for all I know, I might look back on my deathbed and be like, "Oh, that was the pinnacle of everything. That was as high as it got." It's a very real possibility. Um, and one thing, it's like I will say, it's like I'm very proud of it, how it came out, and everybody that worked on it, I think, is so good at every level that worked on it, and I'm so grateful. Like I think people also worked really hard on it. Like I don't think anyone made very much money off of it, at no matter what their position was, and did a lot of like extra stuff to try to make it good because they were excited about it. So that experience I found like incredibly fulfilling. Like when I went up to Portland, which is where they do the animation, we went up a
Oh,
couple
cool.
times. Like I both times I would like tear up like talking to people, because they're like, when you meet people who are like so good at what they do and are working so hard on your thing, it's very moving. So yeah, if nothing ever comes, from it, if we don't get to do more episodes or anything, I'm very grateful. Like you said, like it's such a unusual, very like fortunate path where I was like grouped in with Zach and Mike, and was able to make a show without any experience. So grateful for that. But it's also like something where I'm sort of back to where I was, where I don't know if I'll ever, get a job in a writer's room again. So it's like it's very uncertain. It's like trying to get other things going, and again telling my wife, sorry, we can't plan into the future. Still,
For somebody that does morning pages,
hmm.
like do you have like has there been a reflection about what that means for you, about the fact that, you know I mean, we're all in the same kind of boat, right? We've all
Yeah.
decided, we've all jumped into a career that we knew from the beginning would be uncertain, and
Hmm.
now we are very much living in that.
Yeah, it's like it's funny. I don't have like with my morning pages. It's sort of just like stream of conscious. So a lot of times
Mm.
it's not very deep, but I've had uh, times where I'm writing about. Oh, it's interesting that I'm not panicking right now.
Yeah, you seem very chill.
I am sort of where sometimes I'm like, it's interesting. Like based on my circumstances, which are very uncertain, it wouldn't be weird if I was panicking. But I'm not there yet. It'll be interesting. Like at the end of the year, like circle back with me, and I might be full on like, what am I going to do? But I'm like working on other things. Like Zach and I continue to work on stuff, and again, like I go back to like he's so confident about uh, himself, but also like me. Like he's more confident, I think, about me than I am. And I'm like, yeah, I guess, yeah, maybe this thing will go great. Yeah, it's like let's try to do it. Um, but yeah, at the same time, I have like a 5 year old and a 9 month old, and my 5 year old will. It's very cute, but it's like so heartbreaking. She's like, I think we should have a backyard. I'm like, yes, it would be nice. I get it.
Yeah.
I would like to, yeah, someday buy a house. Just so you know, it may never happen. So I don't want you to
Yeah.
be, yeah, heartbroken.
So cute. It's so cute and innocent. She doesn't understand the economics that goes into having a backyard. in
And she will
in
also
Los
say things
Angeles.
like, I don't know. I try not to pass on like financial anxiety to my kids, but like somehow I must have passed it to the point where like I can't remember what it was, but it was like something where she told me, um, "It's not that expensive, so we can save money for a house."
Aww.
Like, oh, honey, don't worry about that.
Aww. Little tink tink. You know, I call little kids little tink tinks now. And you know, they do absorb the financial anxiety whether you ever say it or not, you
Yeah,
know, whether you're conscious of it or not. And I know that because I did when I was a kid.
yeah, yeah. Makes sense. And yeah,
Yeah,
kids are smart and very perceptive.
they're super smart. What do you want to say to the creative community? You know, any thoughts?
What do I want to say to the creative community? Well, one thing that this was very interesting to me at the time. So, like I said, I would have like been thrilled to when I got the show. If I had like a month prior been offered a role as a writer's assistant, I would have been like, oh my god, yes, this is a step forward. And so suddenly I'm in a position where I'm reading people's writing samples and having a say in who gets hired in the room, which was fascinating as like someone who had written so many samples. And the one thing I realized early on is like, and I kind of knew this, but more so, it's like my samples were not that great. But in a way that I was like, oh, I should write another one now because I think I would have a better sense of what would be a good one now than I used to. And I think a big part of that for me, and my thought is with a lot of the ones that I didn't love, this might have also been the case. Is I think a lot of times people write their like pilot samples to please this like faceless executive that they've decided in their head is the person who gives you a career or who doesn't. And so in different ways, it feels very like sort of recycled, like they're taking successful things from shows that they've seen and sort of repackaged it. And the ones that like you get excited reading are ones that fully feel like in the voice of someone you haven't met yet. But you're like, oh, I kind of know this person and they're so funny and in this like very original way. And they don't seem to have worried about writing a sample for something that would ever actually get made. And so like how we worked with it is it would be like I would be reading all these samples and in the beginning I'd read every page and then it would be like, oh, I'll read 15 pages and then it was like 3 pages. And if the first 3 pages is like we gotta keep moving, there's 150 of these. And then like the ones that I would then tell Zach, it's like these are the ones I really like. Make sure you read these ones. They were all ones that were one way better than my samples and then just like so specific and really felt like they were writing what they enjoyed or what made them laugh.
Wonderful. I love that. Um, I think that that is something that is hard to gauge when when you're writing a sample. Is like, is this even good? Like,
Yeah.
even when you are a pretty good writer, when you start reading a bunch of samples, it becomes so clear what's good and what's not. And I wish I could articulate it better because I almost feel like there's both the voice that's coming through and like the expediency of the writing, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Like just like the ease of just being able to like work through the script and understand exactly what's going on. And that's the fastest way that I can tell if this is a good script or not. Like if it's literally easy to read.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's like, yeah, when I was reading the really good ones, they almost have the false feel of something that was written really quickly, but I'm sure
Yes.
really tinkered with it
Yes. Like
to capture that efficiency. And yeah,
super efficient, super just like this is what's happening in the scene. The joke is very clear. The characters' voices sound very alive and jump off the page. And it makes it's like easy to imagine what this looks like. Like you can just visualize the whole thing because it's written in that way. So I don't know, man. I don't know how to explain it other than that, other than read a bunch of
yeah,
samples, you know?
yeah. Read it, but it's funny. It's like I've read a lot of like when I was trying to get better at writing them, I would read like the search online for like the scripts that were the
Yeah.
pilots produced that year. And
Yeah.
most of those I wouldn't like. I could
Yeah.
admire them. Most I would sort of admire the craft of them sometimes of like this is technically put together well, but didn't necessarily love the humor. Um, And I think like that's something that I would give as advice to myself, at least, is like don't write a pilot for a show you wouldn't watch. And I think I was doing a lot of those, of like writing a pilot, like my version of like a kind of sitcom that I don't watch. So I don't know why I'm trying to do that.
Interesting. It's true. I think that there's like, it's so much more important, at least now, I think more than ever, to like really just do what you want to do and write what you want to write, because nobody knows what they're looking for. And I don't think that anybody knows what's good until it's in front of them. Like, I don't know how else to explain it. I'm just like, I think that there's no like magic formula anymore. Like, I think originality is really it. Like, just do whatever you want. And if somebody relates to that and wants to hire that, then wonderful. Like, and if they don't, then you have a very original voice and you should continue to
like it, yeah.
Somebody else will like it. Another thing that I think that's interesting that you said is that you thought that the scripts that were from higher level writers were just as good, or some of the scripts from like the less expensive writers were even better than some of the, you know what I mean? And that's one of the things that I noticed all the time too, is that once you get into the writer's room, there is this hierarchy, but it feels a little false, because sometimes the hierarchy is, yes, experience, but then at the other times it's like that person doesn't have as much experience, but they're as sharp, they have as good of pitches, they're as engaged, as anybody else. Like, so I don't know. I think really the thing that separates people is experience, and not necessarily a level of talent or a level of like skill, if that makes sense. Yeah, I think sometimes
for our show, also be like for people who haven't seen it, and statistically, you probably haven't. It's like a weird format where part of the show is Zach's character, who's this public radio host, interviewing real celebrities, and those are unscripted interviews that he does with them that we edit down. And so that's about, usually for like the average episode, maybe like 6 minutes of it are those. And so we don't have as much space for like the rest of the show is like what's taking place in that public radio station. And so there's not as much space as you would normally have in a half hour for those stories. Like there's not a lot of ones where we can like fit like an A, B, and C story.
Yeah.
Those amount of pages. So to a certain extent, also, we were sort of like, well, I don't need necessarily someone who's worked on like 8 different shows, because our show is going to be different than any of those were. I'm sort of like, would be more excited about someone who's not trying to like repeat things that had worked in the past.
Damn. Absolutely. 100%. All right. Well, then I guess the message is be original. Do whatever you want.
Yeah. Easier said than done. Yeah.
Oh yeah. 100%. Not easy at all. Well, thanks, Brandon, for being on the show. I really appreciate you.
It was very good to talk to you. I felt, again, like I emailed you this, like you're someone who, maybe more when you lived in LA or when we were both in New York, if I ever saw you out, I was always so excited to see you. Like you're at, like, I was like, oh, I get to talk to Charla. But so this was nice. This is the longest we've ever talked, for sure.
This is the longest we've ever talked. And I definitely was like, I don't know why I thought maybe you wouldn't have remembered me. I think it's because you haven't been my teacher. So I was like, maybe he doesn't remember me.
I don't know. Like one-on-one.
We have.
Where we've like run into each other. Yeah.
You know what? It's just the community is so big, And what do I know? I don't know. I don't know. I was like,
you're very modest. You're thinking that, yeah. You would be,
I don't know. I was like, we haven't talked in years. I don't know. That you might not remember.
Well, don't know.
Huh?
It's because you're in Vancouver, where people that haven't seen.
No one knows me. Yeah, 100%. On that note, thank you so much, Brandon, for coming on the show.
It's very fun. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for checking out this episode with Brandon Gardner. That's all I've got for you today. Until next time, get out there, get to work.